The Hornets beat the Heat 127 to 126. The final in overtime. LaMelo Ball with the game winner as time expired. The Heat had a shot to tie it at the end, but Miles Bridges blocked Davion Mitchell's game-winning layup. Also in this game, Bam Adebayo was injured, and it looked like LaMelo Ball may have raised his leg, and Adebayo fell. We'll have a little bit more on that later in the game, but Ball had 30 points yesterday. The Hornets now with an opportunity at least to get a shot at the NBA playoffs, and the Miami Heat going home. Here are Charles Lee and Erik Spoelstra on both outcomes.
Was this game not a total embodiment of this team and what it's been this season?
Definitely. It just shows the character of the team. I think at the end of the day, execution is not always going to be perfect, but I think that these guys find a way to stick with it and not give in to sometimes when things aren't going well or not going your way. I think that's where I've seen the most growth and maturity from our group is just finding a way to respond. And, I thought that our execution at times was good. At times it was not good, but when it mattered, I thought we executed our side out of bounds really well. And then that winning effort and competitiveness and togetherness to come up with a big-time block at the end of the game just shows kind of who we are.
The experience is what the play-in, has been for us. Every game we've played, except for one of them, has just been down to the wire. It is harrowing. You have no idea what's going to happen. We just could not get a stop, down the stretch. Anytime we had a lead, we had opportunities to get, a stop down in regulation in the last 3 possessions, and we weren't able to get the stop, there at the end.
All right, so the Miami Heat will look toward the offseason. Meanwhile, the Phoenix Suns, what happened to them last night? They lost to the Portland Trailblazers as 3.5-point favorites, 2.5 in some spots. Portland wins 114 to 110. Deni Avdija had 41 points for Portland. He was the big scorer there, and they were down 11 and came all the way back to win. But naturally, Thiago Splitter also with a huge, huge performance down the stretch. Didn't want to make it about himself, just about the team.
I don't want to talk about myself, just the group. I think, it's culmination of a tough year, but this group is very resilient. I think we showed that in the fourth quarter, just believing in ourselves and getting it done. I'm happy for them. They went through a lot throughout the season, and, being in the playoffs, it's a great accomplishment for this group.
How do you get these guys ready to go for, a Friday matchup with everything on the line?
Yeah, we addressed it right away. Just, the goal is get in. Just get in any way possible. It's been our goal for a while, so we got to move on. We got to move on. It sucks. These are hard to take, but there's stuff to learn in here that we got to learn fast and do everything we can to get ready for Friday night. Tomorrow we'll be taking care of your body, extended minutes, take care of the body. We'll watch this film. Again, we can always learn from game 83. It doesn't matter. So learn from the film, get your body right, get your mind right. Watch the game tomorrow night, be ready to go the next day.
Good news for Portland, seemingly at least a better season than most people expected. Meanwhile, the NFL draft is next week. Could we see a big player moved ahead of the draft? Is certainly possible. The Giants and star Dexter Lawrence on the defensive side have been talking about a big contract extension, can't reach one. And so there's a chance at least that you could see potentially Lawrence go to another team ahead of the NFL draft. He's one of the big impact players on the Giants side of the defense, but as of right now, no contract extension there. Meanwhile, in college sports, Louisiana Tech's football team is expected to pay a record exit fee to leave Conference USA and join the Sun Belt Conference. That amount could be $8 million more than UTEP paid to leave Conference USA to join the Mountain West. Louisiana Tech and the Sun Belt could start as soon as 2026, and Conference USA certainly is trying to avoid losing multiple schools at once. Big story from Major League Baseball this morning. It appears as though another contract extension has been awarded to a young player. This time it's Kevin McGonigile of the Detroit Tigers. 8 years, $150 million, according to ESPN. McGonigile, one of the nice young stars in baseball, and off to a good start for Detroit. Meanwhile, a bad start for the Houston Astros finally comes to a close yesterday. They had lost 8 straight games until barely beating the Rockies yesterday, 7-6 6. Christian Walker went 3 for 4 with a home run. So good news for the Astros, their losing streak is over. But bad news for the Mets, they lost again. 7 in a row after losing 2-1 to the Dodgers. Yoshinobu Yamamoto, 7 2/3, 7 strikeouts. He did not factor into the decision. Things seemingly getting desperate for the offense, although Francisco Lindor had his best offensive game of the season. He said it's time to get a win.
Desperation level right now to get a win.
The desperation level, I mean, the urgency level, it's really high. I don't think no one here is desperate, but we understand that we have to win. It's a must win. We're not going to sit here and just say, we'll get them, we'll get them, we'll get them. You know, it's everybody here has a sense of urgency, and we are trying to win. You know, it was just, it's just a matter of time, and we have to get it done. You know, we're still in the middle of April, and we have an opportunity to finish the month in the positive side. So everyone here understands that the task is winning, and we're all going for it.
Mets are having a hard time scoring. So are the Cincinnati Reds, but they just keep winning. They beat the Giants yesterday 2-1, so they win as slight home favorites. Brady Singer, 6 innings pitched, just 1 earned run. Sal Stewart, Spencer Steer had solo home runs in that game, and the Tigers defeated the Royals by a final score of 2-1. The Tigers win as home favorites. They got a good start from Framber Valdez. And also in that one, Kenley Jansen picked up career save number 479 in the Tigers win. Meanwhile, the Brewers beat the Blue Jays. The Brewers, who are they? Blue Jays beat the Brewers 9-7 in 10 innings. Jacob Mizorowski pitched in this one. He struck out 5 and 5 1/3. The Blue Jays end up winning this one late. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. had a couple of hits. Shane McClanahan back on the mound this season for the first time since 2023, and he picks up his first win since that year. Tampa Bay defeats Chicago 8-5 as McClanahan struck out 4 over 5 innings pitched. The Cubs beat the Phillies 10-4. Nico Horner with a couple of hits, and Alex Bregman had 3 as well. The Angels, man, they stuck it to Ryan Weathers and the Yankees yesterday. 7-1. The Angels went back-to-back home runs in the first inning. Don't look now, but Mike Trout appears to be all the way back. Couple of home runs 2 nights ago, a home run again yesterday, but the back-to-back was Trout, Joe Adell, and Jorge Soler in last night's game, and the Diamondbacks beat the Orioles 4-3. They evened up their series as Gerardo Perdomo had 3 hits in that game as well. All right, welcome back to Newswire here on SportsGrid. We've got Sam McQuillan in the house from Legal Sports Report to touch on a number of stories that you can also read about over at LegalSportsReport.com. So let's bring Sam in and touch on those topics, one of which is a little bit of a surprise, I must say. The state of Kentucky, I thought, was going to raise the low age of sports betting from 18 to a minimum of 21. But, Sam, they decided against this, and I wonder why. So you tell us.
Yeah, so the Kentucky House and Senate passed this bill that would have raised the age from 18 to 21 to bet in the state. That's what most states have. That's also trying to keep in line with what prediction markets are doing. Not only would it have raised that minimum betting age, it also would have banned player props on in-state college teams, and it would have mandated that all daily fantasy sports is done peer-to-peer as opposed to player versus house contests, which we've seen in the past. So the legislature passed it, but Governor Andy Beshear actually vetoed it. So the big question is, why would he do that? It seems like a lot of these changes are not big, major changes that would impact the industry that much. The reason that he gave is because the bill also would have allowed the Kentucky Lottery and the Kentucky Gaming Commission to effectively make new rules and regulations for the industry without his consent. They could propose these emergency clauses where they could change, anything from what sports books are allowed to offer, or a whole host of regulations that sports books have to adhere to. He said, frankly, he doesn't want to be left out of the process. He doesn't think that's how it should go. So what happens now is the bill is back in the legislature. They have about until tomorrow to potentially override his veto and pass it on a majority vote, which, again, to try to potentially either change the bill so he does have that power, or just to cut him out completely if they pass it and override his veto. So these changes are very much still in play. The legislature has overridden a lot of Beshear's vetoes in the past, so it has the votes. one interesting part I want to mention on this too is that the bill also would make it for companies that are licensed in the state to do sports betting not able to offer prediction markets in Kentucky. A previous version would have made it if you have a prediction market anywhere in the country at all, you would lose your Kentucky sports betting license. FanDuel, DraftKings, and the other sports books that are doing prediction markets came back to the legislature and said that'll probably cost you about $40 million in tax revenue. So they removed that provision notably, but changes could still be made before the final vote tomorrow. But I would expect this bill to probably go ahead kind of as intended, even despite the governor's pushback.
Well, we'll see what happens in Kentucky. We'll move from Kentucky to, believe it or not, the first quarter of 2026 coming to a close. My gosh, the years just go by. The time goes by so fast. Sam, some numbers coming in from Wall Street on some of the companies that provide sports betting options, and how did they do in the first?
Yeah, so the story for these major sports betting companies like DraftKings and FanDuel over the past year really has been their stocks falling like just a ton, getting really hit hard. Both are down about 40%. Wall Street right now is not predicting that that will really change when we get these first quarter results in a few weeks. And a lot of that, while there is a lot of anxiety out there from investors around prediction markets, a lot of that is tied to the overall betting volume and growth in betting. For years we've seen sports books like DraftKings and FanDuel post double-digit handle growth year over year, the total amount of dollars wagered at their sports books. But in December, it actually was negative for the first time ever, and now Wall Street is predicting that the first quarter was probably more of the same, with a handle down roughly about 2% year over year. So that's a big change from years past when handle was growing 20%, 15% every quarter. Now it's actually going to be down for the first big quarter to start the year. Now, a lot of that is actually about the results of sports itself and the comparisons to last year. Last year we talked a lot about, Craig, the NFL especially, how famously sports books got hit like they'd never been hit before, how that rolled over into March Madness when favorites won at an unprecedented rate. So for sports books last year, they were getting really hit hard in revenue, but because bettors were winning so much, they were actually betting a lot more and handle was up. This year, it's been a little bit the opposite. Sportsbooks did much, much better on the NFL season in terms of winning the amount of bets they took and keeping the money. And it looks to kind of be the same with March Madness as well. But in turn, when you have players losing more, sportsbooks are saying, people aren't betting as much. So it makes it more difficult for us to kind of stay on track. So it's kind of an interesting story along with this prediction market stuff, which, some people believe could be taking away businesses from these sportsbooks. Although Wall Street seems to, think that that's the handle drop is more about the tougher comparisons with last year. And it will be really interesting heading into the World Cup, especially summer, which is going to be a huge opportunity for these companies to, not only attract more customers, but to also, push the handle growth in the opposite direction. It's going to be an estimated, $1.8 billion bet on the World Cup, which is basically another Super Bowl for these companies. So they'll be hoping the U.S. men's national team makes a big run. People bet on that a lot in the U.S., but in turn, if the men's national team does really well, that could also impact margins. So it's always tricky to balance risk-wise, but pretty interesting that the most recent results are kind of dragging these handle numbers for the sports books, despite them kind of doing well overall in terms of betting.
Finally, Sam, let's get to BetMGM. They're reporting numbers in the first quarter, seemingly indicating that the struggles could be partially due to prediction markets coming on the scene. Does that seem accurate?
Yeah, definitely. BetMGM, interestingly enough, because they're owned by MGM, a casino company, they have not been one of those companies like FanDuel and DraftKings that wants to do its own prediction markets. Because they're owned by the casino company, the casinos are really against prediction markets, so it has not launched its own product. And while BetMGM, as well as DraftKings and FanDuel, have been vocal about prediction markets not necessarily stealing high-value customers from them, what BetMGM did come out and say this week is, with the emergence of these prediction markets, which have essentially acted as new sports books and intensified the competition in the marketplace, they're essentially wrestling with more marketing spend from competitors. It's driven up the amount of promo cost and advertising cost in the space in general, especially when these companies like Kalshi and Polymarket aren't paying the same fees and taxes. But MGM says that's actually made it a lot harder to compete marketing-wise, which is one of the reasons that it's trimming its profit and revenue goals for the rest of the year just a little bit as it kind of refocuses marketing. BetMGM notably has been really kind of focused on shifting away from sports betting as its big driver to more online casino, where it thinks it has an advantage with the brand, which means more marketing if you're in a state like Michigan, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia, where BetMGM is legal with online casino. You might see more promos and dollars spent on sports betting there, just because those states also have that other key core product, which is how BetMGM is going to try to be more efficient. So pretty interesting to hear that prediction markets might not necessarily be taking customers away, but they are definitely changing the competitive dynamics among the largest sports betting operators, and in turn that trickles down to the customer eventually in some way. BetMGM is going to be hoping that eventually the Supreme Court rules against these prediction markets, but in the meantime, they're focused on kind of redistributing these marketing dollars and having a better Q1 and Q2 coming ahead.
Sam, as always, great contribution to the show. We'll read more about everything we discussed over at LegalSportsReport.com. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks.